I'm Carole Taylor. On this edition of Journal, we can't avoid the escalation in violence against police in BC. Police who take an oath to serve and protect us, no matter the cost to themselves. In just the last 3 months, there have been 35 assaults on Vancouver police officers. In one horrific attack, which I'm sure we would all like to unsee, an officer was doused in a flammable substance and set afire. In this case, the assailant had 10 outstanding warrants. In a rare show of emotion, the spokesperson for the VPD said, "These attacks were enraging to our officers who are just trying to do their job protecting us." So we circled back to the question of why these dangerous individuals are out on our streets in the first place. Time and time again, they are repeat offenders, frequently with complex co-occurring mental health and addiction issues. So how is our system letting all of us, including the police, down? Is it bail reform that's needed? I mean, really, how can someone come before a judge 30 or more times and still be released? Is it a lack of mental health support or a lack of involuntary care for those with deep problems? Is it an addiction treatment model that just doesn't work? These are some of the questions Elenore Sturko has been asking in the legislature as the Conservative critic for the Solicitor General and Public Safety. Her passion comes in part from her 13 years of experience as an RCMP officer, seeing firsthand the devastation our current approaches have wreaked. We're back in a moment with MLA Elenore Sturko. Elenore Sturko is one of the voices that is speaking up about what's going on in our streets and what's happening with the police. And I congratulate you on the work you're doing in the legislature in opposition. Was there anything in your RCMP career that sort of triggered you to be so involved with this idea of mental health and addiction?
Everything in my policing career. The reason I left my job as a police officer, I actually wasn't close to retiring. I wasn't ready to retire. I didn't leave disgruntled. But dealing with the kinds of files that we did, seeing the government's response, still NDP at the time when I joined politics, left policing, saw the way in which people with mental health and addictions on the street were getting worse, and the violence that police were facing. That's what made me want to go. I was tired actually of seeing police being used as the final safety net for all the programs that are lacking, and tired of police being blamed, to be honest, for the things that are systemic failings beyond the police and firefighters and paramedics' control. And I sort of felt like, maybe one way in which I could help those who make legislation understand what's actually happening at the street level is by going there and telling them and showing them and trying to be part of the conversation to improve things for police and for the people who police come in contact with who suffer from mental health and addictions.
You've talked about one situation that you ran into, which was a young boy who his mom tried to get some mental health help and it didn't work and he ended up committing suicide, and that really affected you.
It did. And so actually this year is the third year where I was able to introduce a private member's bill to amend the Mental Health Act, just 2 sections, but dealing with people who are apprehended by police in emergencies, and then if they are certified when they're released. And so that young man's name was Todd Marr. He did die by suicide in 2009, and that was also part of my journey. Like every time I dealt with someone who clearly needed help and they weren't getting it, it got me thinking, how can we make even small changes to try to have information for those people go forward that might actually impact their care and give those who make those decisions, doctors and nurse practitioners, more collateral information so that they can use that information to make their assessments. It doesn't mean that they're going to, assess that a person is any more likely, to be certified, but at least they'll have that information. And I mean, witnessing someone take their own life is something that stays with you. And I think for most of us who've been in law enforcement, there are things like that that are so impactful that you try to look to make sense of it, and looking for ways to make sure that we're caring for people with mental illness and addiction is certainly something that I brought with me from that moment all the way until I ran for office.
It has to get inside you.
It does, but I think that's what makes it more, I don't know, it's a heartfelt thing. I'm not acting and I'm not making up policies that I don't think are going to work. It's not performative, you know. These are changes that I'm asking the government to make now in my private members bill, which is now going to committee stage, that I know will make an improvement. So because I'm in opposition, you know, I want to be as effective as I can, but I think that if I'm able to just make just this one small change, knowing the thousands of apprehensions that police make in a year, if we can save a life or stop someone from self-harming, this is going to be very meaningful for the province, and that's why I'm doing it.
So what does your bill say? What's the one thing?
Well, there's two things. So Section 28 of the Mental Health Act allows police to apprehend someone and bring them to a designated facility for an assessment. So bring them to the emergency room, and a doctor will assess to determine whether or not they're a risk to themselves or others or of serious deterioration, and can be treated involuntarily in the hospital. So one example that I can also give you came from a VPD officer named Nicole Chan that took her own life, was brought to the hospital, had been found actively attempting suicide. The assessment was made, released her, and she died only a few hours later by her own hand. Perhaps, and we don't know this for sure, but if the doctors had collected collateral information from a close relative, perhaps they would make a different decision and would have certified her and treated her. That's what this bill aims to do. And again, there's also other examples, family members who've actually shared their stories in support of this bill, where a relative who was being treated was then released from the hospital. They didn't know. They weren't informed, even though there is parts of the Mental Health Act that stipulate that you do have to inform a relative. They weren't informed, and that person then subsequently died by suicide. So we want to close that off a bit too by saying that instead of after the person leaves, that the family member is informed before they leave so that they can help be part of the care plan.
And so there's a good chance that'll go through.
I hope so. You know, I truly hope that the NDP is willing to work together now that it's in committee stage, instead of sort of having these philosophical debates as we do when we're in the first and second reading. Now we get into clause by clause to talk about the intent and how we would like to see it move forward and work out any kind of issues, or perhaps make amendments if you have to. Only the NDP themselves know if they have the desire to make this change. It's not a change that will cause an expenditure or cost money. And it's also not one that will allow doctors to share a person's extensive medical history with anyone. That was one of the kind of fears of the legislation, that somehow it will breach people's privacy. It just allows for the sharing and collecting from a close relative, someone who maybe they're taking care of their loved one. 50% of people with schizophrenia in BC live with a family member. So maybe they'll have some information that could help the doctor when they make that assessment.
So as an officer on the street for many years, why do you think we're seeing more violence against police?
Well, I blame two particular things, especially here in Vancouver. One is the prevalence of drug-induced psychosis. Our problem that we have on the street with substance use has become significantly worse. We also have more people living on the street and living in our province with anoxic brain injury. That's, brain damage from a lack of oxygen. When people overdose and stop breathing or don't breathe as often as they should, their brain starts to die. And when we revive them with Narcan, that brain damage doesn't go away. So we have more people living in BC with brain damage. And then anti-police sentiment is something that I know from experience makes your job more difficult. We have a government right now that is paying contracts under community action initiatives, CHI grants that come from the health authorities, some of them receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars, who have publicly expressed that they wish to disband and defund police, including, public prosecution service, and to repeal our drug act, right, the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, and release anyone charged with a drug crime, release them from jail. So here we have one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in all of Canada, I would argue, where police are being assaulted, they're having their lives threatened. And we also have, at the same time, organizations paid by David Eby and this government who are actively working against these officers.
And I was thinking of the downtown east side, where the public is so concerned about it. I mean, I see the disorder all through the city, but it's really unbelievable if you go down to the downtown east side. And so we've said to the police, we need more police officers. We need more of a plan to get at this situation. And so we put more police officers down there, and then they get assaulted more. And it's this vicious cycle that doesn't seem to be solving anything, but it sure is putting some police people in
Well, it's the net that I talked about. Police being used as a safety net. So if you don't address the root causes of the issue, and if we're not providing the types of social programs that are required to help people who have these brain injuries, or the kinds of programming that would help rehabilitate people, then adding more police on top is like just widening that net. And I think the police are doing an awesome job.
So we're going to take a short break, and then we'll come back and talk about what some of those specific solutions might be. MLA Elenore Sturko is someone who's really making this a cause for her time in government. And we were talking about some of the damage that we've been seeing. So let's talk about what are the first steps for actually getting something done about this. I noticed that Alberta recently introduced legislation about secured care. Is that part of what you think should happen?
Definitely. And so during this last election, this last fall, part of the Conservative of BC platform was to have compassionate interventions legislation. So apart from the Mental Health Act, which we know already has provisions for some involuntary care, this would just be for individuals who are a risk to self or others because of drug use. And it doesn't necessarily mean, and I know when people think about involuntary care, they immediately jump to this sort of bed-based lockup, which could be an option, but it actually is more of a spectrum of care, similar to bail programs where people may just be required to make a phone call or to check in at a community-based service. And so having that ability to compel people towards a variety of community-based services, up to and including in rare circumstances, positions where people may go to a bed-based program, I think having those options there is essential. It's actually one of the reasons why the decriminalization experiment that David Eby did and Justin Trudeau did in BC failed, because they didn't leave any opportunity to compel people towards services for dangerous behaviors. They simply ignored the law and let chaos reign. If they had actually gone towards more of a Portugal model where people are compelled administratively to participate in services, we would have been able to see some type of success. You can't simply ignore, antisocial and harmful and criminal behavior and self-destructive behavior and think that somehow things will get better. You actually need to take that maternal or paternalistic sort of approach and say, when a person has lost that ability to make those healthy and safe decisions for themselves, that we will step in, we will take that responsibility that we should and help people get better.
So all of this sounds perfect, but what are the first steps? Like if you, in fact, were Premier today, what would be the first step in getting a system in place? Where do you start?
Well, I think that there's lots of places that have to concurrently start, because we need to remember and always be focused on the fact that the vast majority of people who want help today actually can't access it because of a lack of availability. So there are many people, families who've desperately reached out to me during my time as critic, especially for mental health and addiction, who want their loved one or themselves wanted to get into treatment and couldn't get it. either because they didn't qualify to go without a financial cost to themselves or their family, or because the waiting was so long that by the time that person in their family or themselves were able to actually access it, they had already gone back to a behavior that's causing them harm. So we have to scale that up first and foremost very quickly. And that's one of the biggest frustrations, Carole, that I've had is that, think back to when we had the floods and the landslides that washed out the Coquihalla. I think it was something like 36 days until they reopened it to commercial traffic. Feats of engineering, like marvelous engineering, people from across North America coming to make sure that we could get that open again. Why? Because the province depended on it. Here we have a situation where lives depend on it, 6 a day. And this government has only managed to put forward around 100 beds a year for 8 years. And that's even debatable because we don't even know if those are all treatment beds. These could also include beds in SROs with no treatment whatsoever. That doesn't speak to acting in an emergency to me. It actually speaks of complacency. And we've seen a focus on programs which, in my view and the view of my party, have actually been harmful to British Columbians, like the unwitnessed safe supply program that's dumped millions of hydromorphone opioids into communities, putting pills and a commodity directly into the hands of organized criminals. So we got to stop that. We got to scale up immediately and emergently voluntary care, and then at the same time we need to build capacity in involuntary care. So I really like the federal Conservatives' idea to work together both federally and provincially to scale up services within our correctional institutions so that if individuals who are entangled with the justice system have addictions issues, that they can actually receive treatment for those while they're in custody.
So you're saying treat this as a crisis the way we treat other crises?
Absolutely. Like we're 9 years into a public health emergency. And if anything, I feel like the government is doing less. They don't want you to remember this is an emergency. We even the way in which they're reporting the overdose death reports has changed recently. They've hired a lot of spin doctors in the Premier's office. And, I think part of it is that the reality of what has happened in our province, particularly with mental illness, with addiction, with overall poverty and homelessness in the province, they definitely want to remove the focus from that because it almost cost them the election. We need to get back to treating it as the true emergency it really is.
And how much of a role does bail reform play in all of this? Because the repeat offenders that everyone worries about, the revolving door, is there a solution to that?
Absolutely. I think, look, and I guess I'll give some credit that at least the Premier and our Attorney General, they did go to Ottawa. And there was some bail reform that came forward in Bill C-48, but the reality is it wasn't enough. And it was clear from the get-go once that reform was passed that it wasn't making a difference. Because, you look, I'll give you an example that was just in the news a couple days ago. So on the 16th of April, a guy walks into a South Vancouver retail store and he has a metal baseball bat with him. And he gets in an altercation with retail staff and ends up hitting the retail worker in the head and face with a metal baseball bat. Charged, arrested by VPD, thankfully, they do great work. Hurt this person, ultimately charged with assault causing bodily harm, so we know this person got hurt. I think it was assault PO, and additionally they had received a charge of breach of a release order. So that means they had already been released. So going back and looking in the CSO, that's the publicly available charges for this particular person, just 10 days earlier, on April 6th, they had been charged with assault and breach and possession of stolen property and theft over $5,000. So the fact that already on the 6th they were charged with breach means that they had done something before the 6th. So how is it that someone did something violent? This person also had a history of domestic violence or some type of intimate partner violence. Does an assault on the 6th of April, okay, is already charged with breaching, and then is let go and can smash someone in the head and face with a metal baseball bat just 10 days later. That is the essence of catch and release justice. This is coming more than a year and a half since Nikki Sharma and David Eby went to Ottawa. So, I mean, look, if the reforms you have asked for are not protecting the public, you need to do more. It's great that you did that. Kudos to you. But clearly it's not working. You have people now working in retail settings in British Columbia wearing flak jackets and body armor, getting hit in the head with baseball bats. And it's time to stop patting yourself on the back and get back to Ottawa and get the job done. I am not confident that if we end up with another Liberal government that we will get those reforms that we need, because we do need to send a clear message that this precedents that we have set for these small sentences, in addition to, bail after bail after bail, when a person has clearly breached multiple times, is putting people in our province at risk. Another example was that VPD just released, a wanted warning. There was a guy that had been released from jail, 5 counts of sexual assault, attacks on police, multiple other things. He had received only 2 years, 3 month sentence. A single sex assault can carry a maximum penalty of 10 years.
Oh, Elenore.
I could go on forever. I mean, this is just, we need tough legislation. And, some people may say that's too far, but we have to protect people.
Thank you for keeping up the good fight.
Thanks so much.
Back in a moment. During elections, we're all inundated by promises from all parties. We hear you, we got the message, we will take action. And then very often, nothing changes. The disorder in our streets and the violence that results against all of us, including the police, cannot be tolerated. Where are the leaders who will stand up to the inertia built into our system and actually make changes? Let me know your thoughts on YouTube. Till next time, I'm Carole Taylor.